Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. In our last episode, we explored Chapter 4 of Handbook of Abhidhamma Studies, Volume 2, where we studied matter, rupa in conditional relations. We saw how physical phenomena are conditioned by karma, consciousness, temperature, and nutriment, and how mind and body constantly interact. Today we move into Chapter 5, Conditionality and Dependent Origination. This chapter is especially profound because it connects the Abhidhamma's detailed analysis of conditional relations with the Buddha's central teaching of paṭiccasamuppāda, or dependent origination. Dependent origination explains how suffering arises and how it can cease. It shows the cycle of birth and death, and it reveals the path to liberation. In this presentation, we'll explore how ignorance conditions formations, formations condition consciousness, and so on. We'll see how conditionality explains the cycle of samsara and how breaking conditions leads to freedom. So, if you've ever wondered, how does Buddhism explain the chain of suffering? How does conditionality connect to rebirth? How can we break the cycle and attain liberation? This chapter will guide us. In the Abhidhamma, conditionality is explained through the 24 conditional relations. These show how dhammas condition one another. Dependent origination is the practical application of conditionality to the cycle of birth and death. It shows how suffering arises due to conditions and how it can cease when conditions are broken. So conditionality is the foundation. Dependent origination is the application. Together they explain the dynamics of samsara. The formula of dependent origination is: with ignorance as condition, formations arise. With formations as condition, consciousness arises. With consciousness as condition, name and form arises. With name and form as condition, 6 sense bases arise. With 6 sense bases as condition, contact arises. With contact as condition, feeling arises. With feeling as condition, craving arises. With craving as condition, clinging arises. With clinging as condition, becoming arises. With becoming as condition, birth arises. With birth as condition, aging and death arise. This is the cycle of samsara. It shows how suffering arises due to conditions. For example, ignorance conditions unwholesome formations. These formations condition consciousness. Consciousness conditions name and form, and so on until aging and death arise. This is the chain of suffering. The cycle begins with ignorance. Ignorance means not seeing reality clearly, not seeing impermanence, suffering, and non-self. Ignorance conditions formations, sankhara. Formations are volitional activities, karma. When ignorance is present, volition is unwholesome. For example, when we act out of greed, hatred, or delusion, ignorance conditions unwholesome formations. These formations plant seeds for future suffering. So, ignorance is the root. Formations are the actions conditioned by ignorance. Together, they set the cycle in motion. Formations condition consciousness. Consciousness arises due to past karma. Consciousness conditions name and form. Name refers to mental phenomena, feeling, perception, volition, consciousness. Form refers to physical phenomena, the body. Together they make up the psychophysical organism. Name and form condition the 6 sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These bases allow contact with the world. This shows the unfolding of existence. Formations condition consciousness. Consciousness conditions name and form. Name and form condition the sense bases. The cycle continues. The sense bases condition contact. Contact is the meeting of organ, object, and consciousness. contact conditions feeling. Feeling can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Feeling conditions craving. Pleasant feeling leads to desire. Unpleasant feeling leads to aversion. Neutral feeling leads to ignorance. Craving conditions clinging. Clinging is attachment to sense pleasures, to views, to rituals, to self. This shows how suffering arises. Contact leads to feeling. Feeling leads to craving. Craving leads to clinging. The cycle deepens. Clinging conditions becoming. Becoming is the process of existence driven by karma. Becoming conditions birth. Birth is the arising of a new life. Birth conditions aging and death. With birth, aging, and death inevitably follow. This completes the cycle of samsara. It shows how ignorance leads to suffering through a chain of conditions. The good news is that the cycle can be broken. When ignorance ceases, formations cease. When formations cease, consciousness ceases, and so on until aging and death cease. This is the path to liberation. By cultivating wisdom, we remove ignorance. By practicing mindfulness, we weaken craving. By realizing impermanence, suffering, and non-self, we break the chain. This leads to nibbana, the cessation of suffering. Some critics say dependent origination is too complex. Why 12 links? Isn't this overanalysis? But the purpose is precision. Just as a scientist studies causes in detail, the Buddha explained suffering in detail. Another criticism is that it is too abstract, but in practice, even a basic understanding helps us see conditionality. We don't need to memorize all 12 links. We just need to see that suffering arises due to conditions and can cease when conditions are broken. So, to conclude, Chapter 5 of Volume 2 connects the Abhidhamma's conditional relations with the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination. We've learned how ignorance conditions formations, formations condition consciousness, and so on. We've seen how conditionality explains the cycle of birth and death. And we've emphasized that breaking conditions leads to liberation. Most importantly, we've seen how this helps us in practice. By observing conditionality, we deepen insight and move toward freedom. Thank you so much for joining me in this deep dive into Chapter 5 of Handbook of Abhidhamma Studies, Volume 2. We've journeyed through conditionality and dependent origination, seeing how suffering arises due to conditions and how breaking conditions leads to liberation. If you found this exploration helpful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who might be interested in Buddhist philosophy and meditation. In our next episode, we'll move into Chapter 6, where we explore karma and results in conditional terms, seeing how volition functions as a condition and how karma interacts with other forces to shape experience. Until then, may you be well, may you be peaceful, and may you continue your journey into wisdom.